Hello and welcome to Series 1, Episode 1 of Commander Fodder. So this is a set of series that have been a long time coming. I've been talking about this for quite a while now, and I think finally I've got my head around how this is going to work. So welcome to the very first episode of the very first series of Commander Fodder. I've done an introductory video to this last week, which sort of, I suppose, talked about more about what I wasn't going to do in the various series that we're going to do on this. One thing in trying to put this together that's become apparent is this. My original plan was to do this 100% in paper. As anybody who's tried anything like this appreciates, particularly I don't have what I consider to be a particularly large magic collection. I have a modest, I think, magic collection, and in putting together this series I probably had to track down at least 50% of the cards that I did, probably more than that actually, and of course logistically that can present problems. I mean, it doesn't take me an awful long time to get the cards, but sometimes you can't always get the cards you want, and there is often time factors involved. And I have done series like this before, and often there's been 2-week gaps sometimes between each series. Now that's not a bad thing in itself, but the trouble is you start to lose control of when you can put these out. So it's a lot better if you're not relying on a part of it to arrive, if you like. So what I've decided is, beyond this first series, which is going to be 100% in paper, I'm going to switch to doing it digitally. That means I can utilize Magic the Gathering Online, I can use spreadsheets, I can use a whole raft of tools that I have at my fingertips, which you've seen me use before, to talk about concepts within what this set of series is going to turn into. And so that, just so you know, starting out, that's where we're going to go with this. The first series is our particular Commander Fodder focus is going to be on Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper, specifically originating from the unboxing I did for Beyond the Grave from Coldsnap. So if you want to see that unboxing, check it out, it's on the channel. In terms of the running order of a series, there's going to be 4 to 5 episodes in this. On this particular one, I've sort of reversed the order a little bit, because there's already been a couple of videos where I've talked about the deck specifically. So I'm not going to start off with the first episode about the deck. I'm going to start off with something else that also needs a bit of an explanation, which is starter kits and where that idea comes from. So I can give it sort of the person proper acknowledgement. So what I'm going to do is, first episode, we're going to talk about the concept of starter kits. And going forward in each series, there will be a similar episode. I won't have to explain the concept so much, but we'll be putting together a starter kit. Then we will look at the cards from the original Commander Fodder source. That might be just one card if we've opened, say, either at some point I've opened a repack or similar product that I'm interested in, or a whole load of cards if it's a particular deck that we might be looking at. Then the third episode, we're going to be looking at card selection in terms of filling in the missing gaps for what we've got left of our deck, with primarily Commander resources. So what I mean by that is either other Commander products or multiplayer products actually, and things like EDH Rec, purely for picking up synergies. I'm not looking beyond this first series to talk about whole decks from EDH Rec. We're going to do it for this particular series because I just thought it was an interesting thing to cover, and looking at what I call aggregate deck selection. But we will be using sources like that to basically try and flag up synergies that we might miss by just pouring through Gatherer, which I know is a favourite way to do this, and I've certainly done that, or just doing searches in MTGO. And then the fourth episode is going to be something called Bashing the Binders, which is to basically look at, again, filling out any gaps we've got or doing substitutions from looking at specific magic sets that might have some connection with our original fodder. So in this case, we might look at, say, Coldsnap, or sets which predominantly featured shards. So no surprise, the shards of Alara block for, again, ideas. The cards may already be there. We might have picked it up on a pass through another selection method. And then that episode is really a wrapping up. So if it becomes necessary, in order to explain where we are in the whole toolkit concept, because I'm just going to mention about this in a moment, we might end up spinning out a fifth episode. Now, if that ever happens, the fifth episode, regardless of what series in it, will be a physical card episode, because what that's going to do is that's going to look at augmenting our base toolkit. So in this, there's three outputs, main outputs I see for this series. One is a deck, hopefully, although that may not always happen. With the way this is going to go historically, we may end up with a pretty crappy deck, possibly, depending on our commander fodder. But that's part of the fun of doing this, is we're taking sort of deck building risks a bit. The other thing that's going to come out of this is a process, something that we can repeatably apply as a way of putting together a deck. And the third thing, and I think the most important thing, because this is a theme that I've touched on numerous series, is this idea of toolkits, is like having this nice group of cards where you can use it as a real solid starting point for concepts and themes and various other things. So as I run through the various series, we're going to keep adding to our toolkit in various ways. And so what we want to do is end up with this nice box of cards which we can use as a starting pool for deck building. It's going to be a lot tighter set of cards than, say, something that we ended up getting for, say, I don't know, the deck store, the Commander Box Store Challenge video, or the one I did about the No Hand No Land toolbox template, I think I called it. This is going to be a nice tight set of cards, and within those cards, or within that toolkit, we will have a set of index cards which have list specific cards that we would want to use, say if we were building a red-white deck, or another colour deck, or a non-theme deck, or a mono-white flyers deck, that sort of idea. And so what we're doing is the series is providing inputs, card source into that deck kit. And so that's the one time where I will be buying physical cards, because I really want to produce something physical in real life that represents what we've been talking about as the multiple series of this, like, roll on. So that's where I'm hoping to end up with outputs on there. So let's get on with what we're supposed to be talking about today. We're going to talk about the idea of starter kits, where that comes from, where I got it from. Obviously, people that are watching this might have got the idea, the concept, from somewhere else, because you tend to find that historically a lot of people at the same time generate the same ideas without knowing each other's ideas. But I think it's really important, particularly when you're putting videos together like this, to just acknowledge your sources of research, where your ideas came from. So we're going to start off with the starter kit. This is a swap round from and latest series that I'm going to do, where I'm going to be starting off with the cards from the original deck, so that we can get our heads around that. But as I've said, I've already done an unboxing for this deck and talked about it, I think, in a previous episode. So we'll start off with the starter kit and then go back to the original deck next week. So toolkits. So let's just talk a little bit about toolkits, where this came from, look at a couple of examples, look at some ideas from an author called George Baxter as well, concerning ways of sort of visualizing decks. So let's start off with one of my favourite toolkits. I think what really started this all off. It's a bit of history background, because I like my history, particularly when it's magic history. I was never particularly good at English history at school, but magic history is much more interesting. So in August 27, 2010, so that was the sort of first full year I was out in Nova Scotia, I became aware of a writer then for Star City Games called Benny Smith. Two things I think came out of where that came from is, one, there's a magazine I think I'd shown you before on the channel, which was published by Baxter's. It was actually ended up as a one-off, I think. They never did any more. And in that, there were a series of articles about different formats. They used a number of writers that were already established in magic writing, one of whom was Benny Smith, who wrote a very interesting article on EDH and sort of covered the whole issue of budget staples for EDH, although of course looking at it now, if you look at the list, you'll find that quite a few of those cards will no longer be considered budget, but they were at the time. There was also another author in there that I've read quite a bit of stuff by, someone called Abe Sargent, who was actually writing, I think primarily in that magazine, about is it the Emperor format, I think it's called. He's another writer on multiplayer and has written a lot of stuff on EDH and Commander, and there's a really good series he did on building budget decks in Commander, which I've been following for quite a while now. It's been running over a number of years, and definitely check out those articles on online. What I'll do is in the description section for this video, I'll include the links to these sort of resources. So in addition to that magazine, in the case of Benny Smith, there was an article that I discovered in 2010 which was about EDH starter kits, which was part of his column for Star City Games. And in it, he took a look at building some starter kits for getting into EDH, as it was called at the time. And they were all allied starter kits. They had a universal component, which we're going to look at here, and then a two-colour component. And this one's the Tolzimir Wolfblood, the green-white one. And there was one for each of the 5 allied colours. And then a little bit later, on September the 3rd, so that's pretty soon after, he did one on enemy colours. It's the same concept. It listed the same, what they call universal component, and then again 5 enemy coloured toolboxes. So I think when he costed it up, each part was around $12, I think, somewhere around there. So the idea being, what you did is you took your universal, and then you took the relevant 2-colour toolkit that you wanted to put them together, and then filled it up with basic lands and cards that you liked that were on colour. So it's quite old. It's interesting. It combined 2 components really. It combined this idea of having a solid foundation, that's the word I'm looking for, solid foundation to build your deck on, with a nice, not too unpleasant commander, and then just filling, with cards from your binder that, hopefully were on theme, but again, you might just want to play good stuff. And then sort of fast forward a couple of years, and I'll go through these in a moment, but just so you get the overall idea. He revisited the concept, and this would have been just before the first Commander product was due to come out. And now he was calling these Commander starter kits because of Wizards renaming it, just to avoid confusion, I suppose. And he did a thing called the 3-Colour Shards edition. This came out on April the 6th, 2012. And again, we had a a component that was the universal component. There was a few tweaks in here. You can see we've still got the same dark steel ingot. He'd recognised that some of the card prices had gone up, so he'd substituted for other budget ones. The funny thing about this is, in putting this together today, there's a couple of 2 or 3 cards in here which again are more expensive than they were at the time, so they are no longer budget. And then again a relatively inoffensive, I think a couple of the generals would be considered to be you know, a valid target at the table, but you know, trying to pick again more reasonably priced 3-colour shard commanders. Now it's interesting because, like I said, this was just as the first commander product was, I think, about to drop, or sometime in that time frame. Either it had been released or was about to be released. In fact, it was probably, thinking about that was probably already out, well out by then. I'm trying to think of the year. I should know this off by heart, the year that came out, whether it was 2011 or 2012. So I think it probably came out late 2011. So yeah, so it was interesting that he'd released the Shards edition, because the Commander product itself was actually Wedge. But anyway, that's a story for another day. So obviously our deck is the Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper, or our Commander fodder is that, so that's why I'm going to talk specifically about that starter kit. But I just wanted to show you the one of the original ones, because it's interesting how maybe some of this stuff has altered. So the Universal kit, we've got Dark Steel Ingot, which is you know, you can go into any deck. So for mana, Fillwell Stone, Everflowing Chalice. So you can see we've got our mana rocks here. Mind Stone, which is both a mana rock and can be used to draw cards. Dreamstone Hedron, similar sort of concept. Armory Sphere. So now we're sort of moving on to land fetching. Journeyer's Kite, Pilgrim's Eye, nice foil Pilgrim's Eye there. Obviously not budget, although I don't think it was that expensive. Illuminated Folio, Urza's Blueprints, the card. So we're moving on to sort of card draw here. There's a Sun Droplet, very interesting utility card. One of the things I like when you look at some of the commander decks that are put together is these, I suppose, what would I call it, like storage utility concept, where you've had certain cards which save up a resource almost, or acquire a resource in some way which you can then use later. So this sort of time delay resource. Got a Power Matrix in here, which is a useful utility card. Crystal Ball, which is our sort of scrying, top deck manipulation. We've got some equipment in the universal one. There's Whisper Silk Cloak, Loxodon Warhammer, and then we're moving on to our lands that aren't sort of colour specific, but which will fix for combination of colours, so they'll generate things like 1 mana of any colour. So we've got Rupture Spire. Again, you'll notice these are all on the budget end of the scale. We've got Unstable Frontier and the ever-present Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse. There's also some Tectonic Edge in here, which at the time was, I think, fairly reasonable price. I don't know what these are now. And a Dread Statuary as well. So you notice all of these cards do not care about colour in any way, so they can be in the universal component. So in our 2-colour, we obviously have our General, Talismir, Wolfblood, and then what we're seeing here is, like, you know, on colour, I suppose, one of a better word, staples. Crows and Tusker, I'm sure we've seen quite a few of those over the years. Yavimaya Elder, Securi Tribe Elder, Mask Admirers, so we've got lots of card draw. Kasali Pirate Mage, Acidic Slime, so there's some destruction stuff here. Indrik Stomp Howler, Archon of Justice, Stone Cloaker, Magenta the Lion, Abu Jafar, Deadwood Treefolk, Safi Eriksdotter, Behemoth Sledge, Invulnerability, Ray of Revelation, Kurtar's Wrath. He's very interested in the border posts. I saw that cropping up on another, I think in the Baxter's article in the magazine. Wildfield border posts is in here. Signet, the Sanctuary, and the Refuge. So I'm sure if you've ever looked at sort of budget stuff for Commander, you're probably familiar with those. So now we'll move on to the one that's more relevant for what we're doing here. So we're really just using something that's already out there as a good starting jumping off point. Over time, our toolkit, our specific on color components, our indexes, whatever you want to call them, that we're gonna create, are going to have probably a different mix of cards in them. But it's quite nice to just have something that's easy to work with to start with, and then refine it. And obviously there's some things in here, this Quilt Toolkit, which are no longer budget, and that's something that's in the back of my mind. I want to try and make this, even though we're going to be looking at this digitally, I want something that, at least in paper, is fairly reasonable on the pocket. I'm trying to decide where to put the line. A classic thing is to say, well, the cards can't be more than $1, and that might be where I'm probably going to gravitate around. That's probably going to be $1 US, just because it's easier. If I'm using prices on, say, MTG Goldfish, or prices on other front-end websites that tend to be in the US dollar. So that's probably what I'm going to stick to. I was tempted, because of looking at the prices on some of these cards, they're starting to shift to go over the dollar, so maybe the $2 mark. But I think I'm going to just try sticking to one. Cards have to be less than $1, and just see where we go from there. So straight away, we'd probably have to tweak this toolkit, or if we on subsequent series, when we start to create our own, I suppose there's going to be stuff in there that's going to be a bit more budget. With this one, it was budget at the time, but some of this stuff isn't anymore. Darksteel Ingot. Now you're going to see some cards in here were in the original one. Felwar Stone. We've got a Manolith in here now. Spectral Searchlights in here. Mycosynth Wellspring. So a lot of different mana rocks in here. Armoury Sphere is also in here. We've got Temple Bell, which is card draw. Illuminated Folio, we've seen that already in the other Universal. Urza's Blueprints. Sun Droplet. So 2 years makes a little bit of a difference. Venser's Journal, so a way of having no maximum hand size. It's interesting, cards that sort of affect the hand size, some of them can be quite expensive, and I'm thinking about the land, that name escapes me at the moment. Reliquary Tower, that's it, I knew it would come to me. I think Spellbook, which is just the artifact, is probably still, well, I'd have to check, I don't know what the price of that is. Certainly that Commander only card that they produced, which generated mana and generated colourless mana, and allowed you to have no maximum hand size. I think that's definitely over $1. And yeah, so they can be quite difficult to track down at budget prices. We've got Crystal Ball here, which again, library manipulation, we've seen that more before. Mask of Avacyn, which is our protection equipment. So this one gives the equipped creature hexproof in addition to +1/+2. I think that was in recognition of some of those protection type equipments also had gone up. Bone Horde, It's a living weapon. So this is expensive now. These are about $6, I think, this Nim Death Mantle. Got culling dice in here. Spine of Ishar. Steel Halkite. So you can see now things are getting quite different from the original Universal Toolkit. Got a Shimmering Grotto. A Rupture Spire, which I think was in the other one. Exotic Orchard. An Evolving Wilds with different artwork. And a Terramorphic Expanse, which has always had the same artwork. So then we have the Universal as it was at the time of that Shards article. And now we have our actual on colour component. So we've got Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper, Crows and Tusker, some of these you'll obviously recognise, Sakuri Tribe Elder, Shriekmore, because we're playing black, Bone Shredder, Indrik Stomp Howler, Deadwood Treefolk, Viscera Seer, Golgari Guildmage, Isolda the Blood Witch, Safara Queen of the Golgari, Hissing Iguana, Charnel Horde Worm, Falconwrath Noble, Pyreheart Wolf, Flayer of the Hatebounds, Anger, Undying Evil, Breath of Fury, Obelisk of Jun, so we're now moving on to our mana fixing for the specific on colour, Jun Panorama, and Savage Lands. So what you would see, and if you looked at the other coloured the other toolkits for the relevant other shards, you're going to see the same sort of three cards there. Obviously they're equivalent, so you know, if you'd chosen, let's say, the Naya one, then you'd see the Naya equivalent and so on. So I hope that's just given you a sort of overview of where this idea of toolkits came from. And for this series, we're going to be using this as our starting point, even though, you know, it like several of the cards are over the regular budget. I just wanted to start off with something, and seeing as this was a series that was strongly linked to that original concept, I thought it was a nice way to look back. What I'll certainly do is, as we're refining these, I will look for substitutions here for the more expensive cards, and we'll have a sort of round up of the prices towards the later episodes of the series, and how we might deal with that, particularly when we're sort of looking at the summarize the sort of video, the episode towards the end, the Bash the Binders one, where we might find some good alternates there. So just a couple of final things. Now we've got the clear in our head exactly, you know, the concept of these starter kits, and again, this is something that's going to work better digitally, I think, than me wheeling out a piece of paper with a load of writing on it. So let me just see if I can fold this strategically so it'll fit on camera. Okay. Actually, let's do the one first. Correct. Yeah. So what I've done is I've created this Excel. Actually, this wasn't in Excel. This was in Word. But anyway, a table in Word. You can see at the top there it just says what the commander is, and then I created a table very much inspired by a concept. I think people called them Baxter's box or Baxter's pockets. So Baxter, or George Baxter, was a magic writer who wrote this book. And in this book he describes a concept where you sort of break a 60 card deck down into pockets, and you do that by firstly breaking the deck down into 3 blocks, and they roughly equate to a creature block, a non-creature block, and a lands block, each one which is 33% of the overall deck. Now bear in mind this was written in the early days of Magic, so back then a lot of people were advocating 20 land, and we know that that's gone up. 20 land in a 60 card deck. If you're trying to get enough enough lands in your opening hand, can be a little low unless it's a deck with a real low mana curve. So that went up to 24. But I've been very interested in this whole idea of thirds in Magic. It's almost like a reoccurring theme and a way of breaking it down. So in his one, what he did is it was 3 blocks, each with 20 cards in them, and then in the case of the 60 card deck with 20 cards, they were then broken down into 5 lots of 4. And 4 is quite a convenient amount in Magic, because in regular Magic, you play 4-ofs. So the idea there was that he had the 3 blocks, and then each of the pockets, each of the 5 pockets of 4 cards would often represent a theme in the deck. So you might have a pocket of 4 removal spells, or a pocket of 4 ramp spells, that sort of stuff. And that's something I became very interested in. So I did a sort of variation on this, and it doesn't quite break down in the same way, because we're in a singleton format. But I like this idea of breaking things down into 3s. So what I've done is, on my table, I've got the deck roughly with the dividing lines to show you where 33% occurs, and this just helps me, because I know even though I'm not going to be necessarily playing 33% land, just knowing where that divider is, I can sort of work out, in my head or just visually, the proportions a lot easier. I just think better, I think, when it's organized around some rough dividing lines. So I've had to add shading as well, just to show where everything is, and where that gets adjusted based on this thing with land. So this is just based on a rough thing where we've got the 33%, and then the fact that in a 100 card deck, 99 plus the 1 commander, we're probably going to be playing around 39 land. Again, that's not carved in stone, but that's just a number that I sort of tend to gravitate around and then adjust accordingly. So the shading reflects that. So here, I don't know how clear this is, you can see there's the dividing line between non-creature spells and the land area. So this area here, we've got basically 39 slots, if you like, and that's the bit in grey. And then the dark line here marks where the 66%, however you want to think about it. You've got the remaining 33% of your deck. So basically creature spells, non-creature spells, and land. For this, I've started to develop a cursory legend, so I'm just interested in how those starter kits broke down. So we've got the universal starter kit, and then the allied 2-colour, the enemy 3-colour, and the 3-colour starter kit. I just wanted to make this like a universal template, and different symbols to represent mana fixing, mana generation, card draw, mana ramp, life gain, other ability, scrying, targeted removal, wrath effects, graveyard, and prevention. Now over time I'm going to refine this. This was just a first pass, so I might change my stuff. So, but it just showed me like how many slots I'd got left, where everything is in the grand scheme of things. So you can see, in here where we've got the non-creature spells, you can see all the U's here. So I've used bracket at the front to designate coming from the universal toolkit. You can see we've got quite a few elements from the universal, and saying things like, well, that one deals with mana fixing, and then we've got other ones that actually sort of generate mana specifically, maybe without fixing it. And again, these are very loose terms at this point. I always find it difficult when you're talking about is it mana fixing, is it mana ramp, or is it mana generation? But I just wanted to get some idea. We've got some ramp spells, some card draw in there as well, life gain and other abilities, and then the equipment itself, the prevention spells, the targeted removal, the wrath effects, and then again going back to fixing, because we're talking here about the allied coloured stuff. In the other slots we just got one universal in the creature, which is Pilgrim's Eye for this particular kit for the Tolismir Wolfblood, and then the vast majority of them come from the allied starter kit for the creature slots. And again, just describing what those, or indicating what broadly those cards do, or specifically those cards do, and then the same for the land. You can see I've got an empty slot. When I was filling this up, I was looking at the sheer amount of mana fixers in here and thinking, well, do I really need 39 land? And obviously, as this deck gets modified, then some of these slots may be freed up because of the sheer amount of mana fixing going on here, and also mana production through non-land resources, that I could free up some slots for either support spells, non-creature spells, or creature spells. So what I've done at the top is we've got the amount of slots that are free. So we've got 19 creature spells still to fill. Obviously a large amount of those are going to come from the commander fodder source, in this case our deck, and the relevant cards from there that we decide to port over. And then we've got 7 other spells again. There's a few of those that are going to come from that deck. And then we've still got to fill 30 land out. So a lot of that is probably going to be non-basic lands. We're building a budget-friendly deck. But equally, we could track down other utility lands and other on-colour stuff that might be useful. So then if we move over to the actual one that is we're going to be using, so this is the Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper one, we can start to see some differences here. Again, most of the universal stuff is filling up the non-creature spell slot. Our only universal creature at this point, which is still Hellkite, is obviously different from our original one, and then everything else is coming from our 3-colour starter kit in terms of filling up the creature slots. We still have 16 creature spells left, so as you probably noticed, there's slightly more creature stuff in that toolkit. And the other thing as well to notice with that particular toolkit, it became much more thematically relevant to sacrifice effects. With the green-white Tolismir one, there were probably what you might just call, good solid green-white cards that would work in a deck that provide a variety of useful utility mechanics. Whereas with the Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper toolkit, we're getting a lot more focused. Not only are they on colour, obviously, but they are thematically relevant to the sacrifice stuff. So that way, we might even find that some of the cards that we've got in our that are coming across, or similar cards from our commander fodder source, are already there. So anyway, we'll see in the next episode as we start to bring that across. Our other spells, we've only got 7 slots left, but then there's not a lot of stuff coming across. And again, it's not beyond the realms of possibility, particularly with the more expensive spells here, in the interest of budget constraints, that we might end up pulling stuff out of here and not using some of the stuff from the various components. The universal, maybe things like the Nim Death Mantle, I think has definitely got to come out if we're trying to stick to a budget. And then the bottom half here, we've got again our lands. I think this one we've got slightly marginally more. No, actually, the green-white contains more lands. Let me just check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 7, and the other one was 8, I suppose. 8, just seeing what I've done there. Oh yeah, I see what I did. Okay, that's good. Yes, because I've used up that other slot in the other one. Yeah, so that's just a way in which I've applied this sort of slot concept. We're using multiples of 3 here, just again to help me get my head around, like, you know, what might the deck be made up of thematic wise, what does it concern here. You can see we've got the sort of graveyard indicator as a lot more prevalent, you know, for this particular one, particularly with the on-card stuff. So again, you know, stuff to look out for when we're putting this deck together is we need stuff that's going to interact with Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper's ability, particularly bearing in mind that he cares about other non-land creatures we control being put into the graveyard in order to generate those Graveborn tokens. So what we're looking for, as you can see from just the toolkit itself, we're looking for stuff that triggers on anything that would do that. So there's going to be stuff that sack effects in there, which allow us to sacrifice creatures, so we don't have to rely on them just dying in battle in order to trigger that generation of that token. But also bearing in mind that once we generate that token, if that token dies, it's not going to, you know, re-trigger his ability, because it's a non-token creature. So just remember, when we're doing this, we're trying to look for stuff that, one, is going to go to the graveyard. You know, it's going to be, one is it's a non-token creature, but also we have means of getting those back and replaying them and re-sacrificing them in some way. Hopefully getting them back permanently, rather than just relying on sort of undying abilities where they come back one more time, or sort of unearth stuff, you know, those sort of things. So we definitely want stuff, you know, reassembling skeleton type effects, anything that just doesn't go away would be really useful, so we can resack it. Anyway, there we have, I think we've covered all the things I wanted to just cover in this first episode, and taking a look there at you know, the concept of starter kits as we're going to use in this set of series ongoing. So thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.